auto thefts, as you probably know, are on the rise right across the country. It is a crime police say has become highly profitable with very low risk for the offenders, and Ottawa is under pressure to take action. Last week, politicians met with law enforcement, border officials, and the auto industry for a national summit, with some suggesting harsher penalties should be on the way. Earlier, I spoke with Canada's Minister of Justice. Minister Virani, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The Prime Minister said this week that he wants to see harsher measures for auto theft. You've said as well that you're looking at it, especially for repeat offenders. What kinds of things would you consider then that you don't have on the books?
Well, Rosie, we had an auto theft summit this week, and I think it was really important for us to hear from various sectors, various stakeholders, various elected leaders, law enforcement about what it takes to address this problem. My job as Minister of Justice is to keep Canadians safe. I'm very keen to do exactly that. My job is the criminal code. It's a statute I'm directly responsible for, so I'm taking a deep dive into that legislation. I know that there are very significant penalties that are on the books right now, so I want to make sure Canadians know that auto theft is a crime. It has a mandatory minimum penalty. There's also a maximum penalty. We actually increased that maximum penalty in Parliament in 2019, something that the opposition voted against at the time. There's also where you combine auto theft with organized criminality.
Yeah.
There's a provision for an aggravating sentence there, so an increased penalty in that regard. So there's lots of tools there, but I guess what struck me at the Auto Theft Summit, Rosie, was this idea about the level of organized criminality and their involvement, the level of violence that we're seeing, weapons, people's doors being broken into, and even carjackings.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I mean you've laid out some of the things you've done, but I think you would also agree more needs to be done, because we are seeing an increase in this kind of thing. So talk to me about carjacking in particular, because you said that there are offenses that deal with theft and then there are offenses that deal with organized crime. Does that mean that you need a new offense that deals specifically with carjacking?
Well, that's something that we're actively exploring, to be honest with you, Rosie, is that this idea that when you bridge the two, right now you've got sort of combination aspects in the criminal code with these thefts, but the actual act of carjacking involving a hostile interaction with an individual, at a stop sign, at a street light, on a street in Canada, at a parking lot, that's pretty invasive and quite troubling. And having one of the principal aspects of the criminal code is acting as a deterrent for criminal behavior, and we need to be understanding that and how we can improve the tools that are in the code to emphasize that deterrent effect. People have also talked to me about potentially raising the maximum penalty, and also looking at when weapons are involved. So these are all factors that I'm considering quite closely. I've heard from different attorneys general around the country. I've definitely heard from law enforcement, people like Chief Demkew here in Toronto, Chief Durayappa in Peel, about these issues. I'm working with my officials quite closely and quite quickly to see what we can do to complement the suite of what is available in the code to really demonstrate that deterrent effect. But always keeping in mind that sometimes the quick reaction is to go after sometimes the person who's as young as 16, who's engaging in these thefts, but they're being orchestrated and masterminded by a criminal operation.
Well, so if I can interrupt you for a moment, just because I did want to ask you very specifically about that, because it does seem as though there are sometimes very young people who are being paid to do the actual car theft, the auto theft, as you point out, but it's organized crime that is behind them. So how do you make sure that the young person committing this offense, so certainly it's a crime, isn't the only person being held responsible for this?
Well, I think we make sure that that's not the only people that we're targeting, right? We want to obviously make sure that criminal behavior is corrected on Canadian streets, and that's part of my job. But the key part of getting at the root of the problem, that's when you get beyond slogans and you get to sort of rolling up your sleeves and actually creating a purposeful solution, is when you target the people that are masterminding that 16-year-old and the people that are behind the scenes, the people that are getting that car from Toronto to Montreal, through the port of Montreal and off to a destination somewhere in West Africa. And what I get troubled by, Rosie, if I'm being frank with you, is that we know that there's organized criminality. We know that from hearing from law enforcement. We also know that organized crime operates best when there's money laundering and when there's things like cryptocurrencies and digital assets are being transferred within Canada or around the world. We actually have legislation on the floor of the House of Commons right now to target exactly that. how we deal with digital currency, how we deal with seizing the proceeds of crime and stopping money laundering. And that legislation, notwithstanding Mr. Poilievre's grandstanding on this issue, he's actually obstructing that legislation and declared that he's going to vote against it. So that's when I question the bona fides of people that are other members of parliament and other leaders of parties in terms of how willing they are to do the work that's necessary to stop this crime, because tools are already being debated independent of other tools that I may put on the floor of the House of Commons.
Your vehicle, your ministerial vehicle, was stolen in November, and that wasn't. I mean, it was the first time it happened to you because you've just recently become the minister. But it had happened 2 previous times with the Justice Minister's car. It's happened to other government officials. What can you tell us about what happened and how it was recovered? Because unlike a lot of people, your car was recovered.
So what I can say to you is that, I mean, the lesson for me in that context, Rosie, is that this is an issue that's touching all of us. It's touching communities right around the country, and that includes vehicles, the Department of Justice vehicles. But what I think it brings home to me is this idea that, you know, whether I'm hearing it in terms of my neighbors, whether I'm hearing it in terms of my constituents or my colleagues in different parts of the GTA or literally around the country, is that we need to be addressing this quickly and fast. And there's a sense of urgency.
Yeah, I don't think people would disagree with you, but I did ask you specifically what happened with your car and how it was recovered, because some people might say, well, interesting that the Justice Minister's car got recovered, but mine can't be.
And I think for those people, what I'd say to individuals, what we heard at the auto summit is that the recovery of the vehicles is critical, and what we need to be doing is changing the tools that are available in order to do that recovery. A lot of people are taking steps into their own hands to have tracking devices in their vehicles. What I think really came out of this summit, Rosie, is some of the comparative evidence in other parts of the world. The United Kingdom has what I understand to be the most stringent vehicle safety and anti-theft standards for vehicles sold in Britain in the world, and their resulting auto thefts are some of the lowest in the world. And I think there's a responsibility on auto manufacturers to be ensuring that they're not as stealable, and you're going to see. But did your car, Minister, have tracking on it? Is that how it was recovered? In terms of the vehicle, the Department of Justice vehicle, I do not have an answer to that, Rosie, whether there was a vehicle tracking device. What I think is critical for Canadians to understand is that people are getting frustrated when they know that their car might be on a container in a rail yard in Milton, or might be Port of Montreal, and they want to be able to get it back and get it back quickly. And that's what that funding of $28 million is going to help us do. It's going to help us scan those containers, staff up the borders. Let me just end on this, Minister. In terms of the other things that you have or are considering and putting on the table, what kind of timeline are you looking at, given, as you say, the urgency some people feel around this issue? Well, what I've said to my officials is that we need to be working in terms of weeks rather than months. Okay. Certainly the Prime Minister's attendance at the Auto Theft Summit emphasizes the importance he places on this. You had 4 or 5 other ministers there. Yeah. We are all seizing this as a moment to take action, and immediate action. And you've seen that in the last 10 days in terms of 3 different announcements. Minister, thank you. Come back anytime. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. So while the government's working on this plan to combat auto theft, many Canadians continue to see their cars vanish. Megan Walker's car was stolen right from her driveway. Megan, good morning to you.
Morning.
So what happened? It was a morning, you woke up, you looked outside, and your car was gone?
Yeah. I went to start it, and I didn't hear it start, so I went out, and my car was gone. I went up to my boyfriend and sister, asked them if they had moved my car. They didn't, and then when we looked out, there was some gloves and some other items that were in our driveway that weren't ours, and so we knew that it had been stolen.
So what have police said to you about where it is, if they know where it is? What kind of information have you had?
Yeah, so I have heard nothing from the police except for when they came to my house to do the interview. They had said that about 9 cars a night in my area get stolen. And I have not heard anything since. And when I tried to get the police report to send to insurance, they told me it would take 40 days just to get that police report. And insurance told me that without the police report, it can take up to 12 weeks for it to be deemed a total loss.
Nice. Okay, so you're in Milton, Ontario, just so people know, which is where a lot of carjacking and car theft is happening in Ontario for sure. So what are you doing right now? Like, you just have you rented a car? How are you dealing with your life without the car?
Yeah, so unfortunately, insurance, if you have rental car coverage, it's not much. So I ran out of my rental car coverage. So I did need to go and purchase another car, and my car still wasn't deemed a total loss. So I then had to carry 2 car insurances and 2 car payments,
Jeez.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And it was a nice car, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if it was your dream car or if it, you loved it.
No, yeah. I really liked my car.
Yeah.
So I was sad that it was gone. It was only a year old. And you were talking about them being recovered. I know someone who had their car recovered, and there was over $20,000 worth of repairs that were needed to it due to the thieves taking equipment out and things like that. So and you really want your car recovered?
Yeah. And so when it happened, though, did you believe that it had been stolen? Were you kind of in shock? What was going through your head?
Yeah, I tried to convince myself that I just left it at a friend's house. But you don't think that stuff will happen to you. You hear about it, but you don't think that it's going to happen to you. So I definitely was in shock when it was out of my driveway.
So this is something now that, the politicians are talking more about, even though it has been an ongoing issue for some time. I don't know what your thoughts are about what they should be doing, but what would make things easier, do you think, for people like yourself?
Well, I mean, I think, so the issue I found, it was a lot of back and forth with insurance, and the police really couldn't help me at all. But I think it just needs to be stopped in general. Like, them being at the ports and looking for cars and everything, that's great. Cars can get recovered, but how do you find the people who actually did that?
Yeah. Will you buy another car, or are you committed to doing that? And
I'm definitely not buying the same car. So,
it was too nice, I guess, is the lesson you've learned.
Well, and the same person who had the damage to their car ended up getting the same car again, and that one got stolen as well. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, but as you know, it's happening to a lot of people. So thanks for telling us your story, and I hope it goes smoothly, this next part, and that you can get a new car quickly.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Nice to meet you.